Now before we go creating our mirrored geometric patterns, let me show you why it's important to have a pattern that has diagonal lines. So this one here has very strong horizontal and vertical lines. It's very much like a grid. It doesn't have any diagonal lines. So we're going to take a look and see what happens if we try to mirror that. So we can see we're tiling this. It's a perfect seamless tile. Under mirror type, it says none. So let's change that. Let's go to horizontal. No effect. Vertical, no effect. And both will be no effect. Because you have strong horizontal and verticals, no diagonal lines, there's no mirroring effect, nothing that you would actually notice. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, this one has nice diagonal lines, so let's check that one out. So again, mirror type is none. Let's go to horizontal. We get the mirror of the horizontal going across like this. You can see that. They're going in reverse. Let's do vertical. It's going to go down. And again, we got a nice mirrored pattern there. We go to both. We mirror both the horizontal and vertical. You can definitely see a geometric pattern there. So you need strong diagonal lines. The longer the diagonal line is, the more you're going to see the mirror pattern. So we need strong diagonal lines to create a good geometric mirrored pattern. So I think what we're going to do is use this one right here. This one has strong diagonal lines, but it also has a little green grid in there that has strong horizontal and vertical. So we're getting kind of the combination of both of that one. So let me copy that. And let me paste it here. Okay, so what do we need? We need this one right here. So again, we're going to crop. Now remember, you're not going to be doing this when you do your own because you're only going to be working on one tile at a time. So I'm going to crop that out right to here. And we need to make this a seamless tile. It works better if it's seamless. Okay, the next thing to do, of course, is to copy and paste that as a new image. We have to crop the edges. I'm going to leave it in the blue, I think, so I can see it better. And I'm going to stretch it out a bit. So we always crop the edges out. They're always going to be kind of curved and bent. Okay, so now we have to create our nice seamless tiles. That means, again, we take the first one, we hold the control and the shift, control duplicate. The shift will keep it in a vertical or horizontal straight line. So we're obviously going horizontal, so we want it lined up. We want them touching like that. Okay, now I'm going to take this one, use my left arrow key, nudge it in there till it's perfectly lined. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to drag this back. And again, you have to look at the edge. There's the edge of the first one. This has to touch. We can't have space between it or they won't line up perfectly. So it has to be touching that like that. Looks perfect. We get rid of this one and bring that one here. Then we got to do it to the bottom. So we drag this one. We hold the control shift, drag it down, touch, and then we go back up, take that one up till they match perfectly. You can go pretty high up. I'm going to make sure I get a good pattern there. I want to make sure I can see everything. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to right click, drop that down. Again, we have to go right to the edge. Right to the edge. As close to the edge as you can get. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, now we're going to make that smaller. And I think what I'm going to do is make that slightly different color. I'm going to go to color. I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. You're going to just see it a little better if I add a little bit of color to it. Now the first thing to do is make sure that this is a seamless tile. So we're going to copy it, click on the shape, go to your fill, picture, texture, clipboard. Now we have to tile it, and we get a perfect seamless pattern. Now it's not always necessary to have seamless tiles when you're trying to create a mirror pattern. That's only necessary when the tile has very strong angle lines or some type of geometry in here that's clearly visible, because then it has to line up. Now when we do our artistic effects, they're not going to have the strong geometry in them. They're going to be more abstract, so it's not really necessary that they have to line up perfectly. There will be occasions that we have to clean up the edges, but other than that, we don't have to worry about them lining up perfectly. They will still work perfectly as a mirrored pattern without worrying about trying to get seamless edges. Now let's talk about the mirror types. So right here you can see under the mirror type, the default is none. That means it just goes right in as it is in the tiles. So our alignment is to the top left. That's just our default. We can change it to wherever you like. So the default is top left. So what does that mean? That means the tile starts at the top left. So that's the first one. The first one doesn't change. When we start the mirroring pattern, the first one doesn't change because it starts at the top left. So it stays the same. So let me show you how this works. So right now we have none. Let's go to mirror type and let's go to horizontal. And so you see what it does here. It kind of makes like an arrow shape going down. This is all PowerPoint's doing. Because we're starting from the top left doesn't move at all. It never moves. So to mirror that, it just takes that, duplicates it, and just does a rotate and horizontal, does a horizontal flip on it. And you can see that right here. So there it is. And you can see it going down there. That's all it's doing. Now let's try a vertical. And you can see what's happening there. So again, the top left one does not move. It stays in position. So if it stays in position, then it has to move down. So we take this one down. And what it does, it rotates it, it flips it vertically. And you can see definitely that pattern right there. It's flipping it vertically. When we go and we choose both, well, then it just takes this one, duplicates it, and it flips that one. And it flips it horizontally. So these two obviously are upside down. These two are right side up. And there's your mirror pattern. So if I take these, you can see the mirror pattern right there. And that's simply how it works. Simple as that. Okay, so if you've ever been confused about how that mirroring type works, well, there it is. Okay, so let me get rid of these. You don't need these. And let me put this in the text. I'm going to copy that. Click on my text. Go to my text options. Go to the fill. There it is. And we're going to tell it to go to both. And we have something like that. So it's same mirrored pattern. So this is not a bad pattern for text. It's not too heavy. It's not too busy. So it looks pretty good in the text. And again, you could try different options. You don't always have to go to both. You go to vertical. You can try horizontal. And as a matter of fact, when we start applying artistic effects on the pattern, you're going to want to work with this mirrored type because sometimes horizontal works better. Sometimes vertical works better. Both isn't always the solution, so you have to play with them to see which looks best. Now, really what you're trying to do is hide the edges. So when you apply artistic effects, there might be some edges, and we're really trying to hide those. So that's why you have to play with the mirror type. So let's start adding some nice artistic effects. So let's take this, put it over here. Now, this is not bad. We can try changing the color and that, but this is a little too geometric. I like to break it up a bit. It's too clean, too mechanical looking. So I want to add a nice artistic effect to this. So I'm going to duplicate this, keep the original, and I'm going to go to my effects right here. I'm going to go to artistic effects. Now let's just try something simple. Now let's try this one here, line drawing. And line drawing actually puts lines, but you have to drag this all the way over and you get these lines. Line drawing has a transparency by default of 25%, and I like that. That means I can see the lines, but I can still see the background. Now let's take a look at that and see what that does. We're going to copy it, click here, go to our fill, clipboard, tile it. It still remembers the both, so there it is. So this is a little more casual. This is a little more loose. I kind of like this better. I think the other one was too geometric. Like you see here, it's too geometric. This one is a little more casual. So I kind of like that. Now let's try that in the text. Copy that. Let's click on the text, text options, click here. Let's change this to both, so it goes in as both, and we'll go clipboard, tile, and we have that. Okay, same pattern is there, and it looks a little more casual. It's not so rigid and structured as the other one was. Okay, so that's one nice artistic effect we can use. Now, one of the advantages of using the shapes is that you can continue to modify the artistic effect. So if I click here, you'll see I have access to my artistic effects. You can see it here in the panel and up here. Now in the text, I don't have that access. So if I'm going to put a nice tile in here, I have to do all the work outside and then copy and paste it into here. But with my shapes, I can continue modifying this. So if I kind of like that but want something different, I can go back here and try something different. Let's go to paint strokes. It's a little darker. You can always play with your options here. Makes it a little darker. If I don't like that, I can try sponge. Play with your options again, and so forth. So in the shapes themselves, you can continue to modify the effect. Not all the artistic effects here are going to work well. There's only a certain few that really stand out, and that'll be things like this. That'll be paint strokes, paintbrush, sponge, cutout, and of course, glow edges, glass, and line drawing. They're going to be the main ones that we're going to be using. They're the ones that are going to give you some of the more interesting effects. Now let's make a fairly dramatic change to this. When you want to change an effect and make it more dramatic than the one you always go to, this one here, glow edges. So we click on that, and we get something that looks like that, which is very different than what it was. Let me take this one, copy it, and make a comparison. Exact same pattern, but this is far more dramatic. So glow edges always adds a lot of drama to it and intends to make things brighter. Kind of looks like neon lights. And then of course we could play with this. We can play with the options and you can see how it modifies. So if I want to do this with text, I have to go back to my tile and apply that effect to my tile. And then paste into the text. Then you get a similar effect. So again, working with text, you have to do all the work to the tile and then copy and paste it. But when you're working in the shape, you can modify it there. Now the idea is this. We're going to be applying effects on top of effects. So what we want to do, of course, is you want to modify the tile and then paste it in. Because if I go here and I choose effect, all I'm going to do is replace that effect. So if I go back to the paint strokes, for example, all it will do is replace glow edges. It will not work on top of glow edges. And what we want to do now is kind of combine our artistic effects to have one kind of work over another one. So this is fine if you just want to change the artistic effect. But when you want to combine your artistic effects, have one play on top of another one, then you have to go back to the tile. So what I'm going to do now is show you that. I like this effect, but to me, it's still a little too mechanical to me. I want it a little more loose. There's nothing I can do here. If I take and apply another effect, it'll just replace that. Now, what I want to do is work on top of that. So I'm going to take the tile, I'm going to copy it, paste it as a new image. Now I can apply effect on top of this one. So what the effect will do is kind of work with this one. It's not like Photoshop where you can layer your effects. It's not that way. It's just that the effect now will work with the pattern it sees here. Okay, so let's go here. I think I'm going to go to this one. This is one of my favorite, paintbrush. It gives me a far looser effect. So I'm going to copy that, put it in here, and tile it. That's a beautiful pattern right there. And we do that. So we get something that's a little more casual, a little more loose. And if you're not happy, we can move this around. If you're not happy with that one, we can go back here. Let's try dark strokes. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's copy that. Let's click here. Let's paste that. Let's tile that. And you get a pattern that looks like that. So these patterns tend to me to look less rigid, less structured, less mechanical, and more artistic. So I'm kind of going for more of the artistic kind of effects. And let's try sponge. Watercolor sponge can kind of look like paintbrush, but it does have its unique little properties. So let's take that. We can even move them up a bit. Let's go here. Let's take the brightness and we'll go there. Contrast, a little higher. Okay, that's nice and bright. Let's copy that. Let's paste that. Let's tile that. And you got an entirely different pattern. Okay, so compare that to that. Different pattern. And as you start adding artistic effects, these patterns are going to constantly change. They aren't going to look like what they originally started at. You're not going to have strong geometric lines like you did here. You're going to get different kinds of patterns, and they're very interesting. I love these patterns right now because they're nice and colorful, but they're also very painterly, not so rigid and structured like this. Now, you may like a more structured pattern like this, but I'm going more for the painterly type effects. Let's try that in the text. So let me copy that. Let's go to my text, text options, fill, and let's tile that. You can see that we're starting to get a little busy here. So what works good in the shape doesn't necessarily translate into the text. It kind of looks a little too busy. Maybe if we made a thicker outline, it might stand out more. So we got to be careful with that. So when you're putting these nice patterns into your text, you got to make sure that you can still read your text. We can still modify this. We can go back to our shapes. Let's go back to artistic effects, we can continue to modify the pattern. So let's try cutout. I like cutout a lot. Cutout makes nice big patterns. It kind of flattens the colors. It limits the number of colors. It's kind of like a posters or taking paper cutouts and pasting them on a poster so you get big areas of color. So it kind of flattens things out and it kind of makes it a little more cleaner. So I'm going to take the slider bar around and we got a pattern like that. It looks pretty good. Now you might see some lines here. You see these? So as you apply an artistic effect on top of another one, sometimes those edges don't line up properly, as you can see here. So what you have to do is go back to the original tile and just crop it. So I can see the lines at the bottom. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to crop that a little bit out of the bottom. And that just happens when you put one pattern on top of another. So we just crop that out a bit. So I'm going to copy, put that in there, tile it. Let's go back to cutout. And you can see that little line is gone. So again, those are imperfections as you kind of apply one effect on top of an image that already has an effect. Sometimes you might get some lines. You just got to look where it is, crop it out, paste it again, and apply the effect. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's try some more. Let's go to this one here, one of my favorite, paintbrush. I like that. We can loosen it up by doing that. So again, lots and lots of options. Now keep in mind that these are patterns that will continue. So if I click here and stretch, the pattern just continues. You see that? These are mirrored patterns and they will just continue, big or small, as much as you stretch this. So that's the beauty of this. It's a tile pattern, it'll just keep on tiling. So that's one of the best things about that. So let's click on this tile. Let's copy and paste it as a new image. Why is a new image? Because I want to work on this pattern. So what I'm going to do now is I'll obliterate this pattern so I can kind of start again. So to obliterate the pattern, I'm going to go to this one here called glass. And we get something like this. Now glass itself is not too bad an effect. I can copy, tile it. Bit of a busy pattern, I think. But glass is good to obliterate a pattern so that you can kind of start again. And that's what I want to do. I want to start again. And then I'm going to copy, paste again, so I can work on top of the glass pattern. Okay, so I'm creating new images all the time so I can put an effect on top of that effect. Okay, so let's go here. Now, if you actually want to see live previews, you don't get to see the live previews here in the panel. You just have to choose one. So if you actually rather see live previews, you go to Format and you go to your Artistic Effects. And then you can just run your pattern there. You can see it that way. For glass, let me try going to this one here. I'm going to go to Paint Strokes. That always gives you a nice dark object. And of course, you can take the slider bar up or down. Let's check that one out. Let's copy, click in here, tile that, and you get darker pattern. Okay, let me go here and let's change that around. Let's try maybe, again, let's go to Paintbrush. Much looser pattern. And then you can make it darker or lighter. I can go to my colors. Maybe I'll make it a little brighter, like that. Let's go to Picture Color. Okay, so you can go to the blue. You can go to more to the green and yellow. So let's say I wanted more blue. Let's take that, copy that, paste it in there, and we have something like that. And again, you can go back to your Artistic Effects and work here. So let's try maybe Watercolor Sponge. And we get something like that. Let's go back to Cutout. And we get a nice pattern like that. Maybe that's a little too blue. Let me go back here. Maybe take the temperature up a bit. That looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to take this tile, and what I'm going to do is apply cutout to it. And I'm going to take it up like that. Now, because cutout gives you flat areas like you see here, one of the things you can do is make it a little more three-dimensional. And one of the artistic effects that works with that is cement. Cement will work really good with cutout. Doesn't necessarily work well with everything else, but it works really good with cutout because it has a lot of flat areas. I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, paste it as a new image because I want that to work on top of this. I don't want to replace it. I want it to work on top, so it has to be a new image. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to cement. Okay, now the thing with cement is that you want to take your spacing and drag it either all the way to the left or all the way to the right. That's the best. That gives you the best three-dimensional effect. So I'll try all the way to the left like that. And let me go back here. Maybe I'll add a little bit of sharpness to it. And maybe I'll just change the temperature a bit. Maybe add a little more contrast. Okay, let's try that. We're going to copy that. Click here. And do that. And we have a bit of a three-dimensional effect. So you can see that looks pretty nice. We can try it in text. It'll be a little busy, but let's see how it looks in text. Again, it's a beautiful pattern. Compared to what we started with, you can see it's very dramatically different. Things that I haven't mentioned is, of course, you can rotate this. So if I were to rotate this, copy and paste that in there, you're going to get a different pattern. Beautiful pattern. So it's kind of like a kaleidoscope pattern. That's what I like about these. Now you can see we have edges here. Okay, that would mean that you'd have to crop them. I'm not going to bother here, but you kind of get the idea. Where the edges are, you have to crop them and just tile them in there again. So that looks pretty good. It's very, very creative. And I bet you never thought PowerPoint could do that. Okay, so we're getting these really abstract, creative, kaleidoscope type patterns that if you were to do that in Photoshop, man, it's going to take you a while. Here we're doing them like really, really fast. Okay, let me take this pattern. Let me copy it, paste it as a new image so I can work on top of it. I don't want to replace it. And let's change the pattern. To do that, we're going to go all the way back to glow edges. And it gives us something like that. Really, really quite dramatic. So glow edges really gives you a nice neon kind of effect. But sometimes it looks a little too gimmicky. So you want to try to play around with the smoothness, see how it looks. And then you just kind of move it back and forth till you find what you like. So let's say I like that. Let me go here and maybe make it a little brighter. And let's copy that. Let's put it in here. We'll tile that and take a look. Amazing pattern. Absolutely amazing, colorful pattern. Again, I'm not that crazy about glow edges directly because to me that's a little bit of a mechanical look to it. Anybody who's worked with programs like Photoshop or Paint programs, they all have a filter that acts like glow edges. So I always spot those, and I think a lot of people can spot that as being, oh, they just put a filter. I want my things to look more creative. So what I'm going to do is, again, copy this, paste it as a new image, and we're going to go back and apply a different filter. So I always like to go back to my painterly filters because that's what I like. I like painterly effects. Again, you can like them more mechanical effects, but I like painterly effects. So let me go back to my paintbrush because something like that, a little more painterly. Let me copy that, put it in here. And it's a little bit looser than this one. So you can compare the two. And if you want to try something different, you can go back and say, let's try dark strokes. A little probably too dark. Let's try sponge. But again, we can always go to our brightness and contrast and fix that. So beautiful patterns, beautiful patterns. We can try this one, marker, see if marker does anything. Not too bad. Marker puts little dabs of paint. It's like if you zoom in really close, it's like little star patterns. They're very tiny, but it looks like little star patterns on it. So that's not too bad. And again, we can rotate, etc., etc. Okay, now what I'm going to do is crop one of these tiles. So these tiles can make many different patterns. Like I say, you can rotate them, but you can also crop them. So let me take this one. Let me crop it. Let's say up to here. Let's copy that. Let's click in here. Paste. Tile it. Okay, so you take a look at that pattern, you look at this pattern. They're quite different. So you can really, really play with these patterns by cropping them and get different kind of mirrored kaleidoscope effects. Beautiful patterns, really quite nice. Again, very complex looking, but very simply done. Now let's try that one in the text. It'll probably be fairly busy in the text, but let's see how it looks. It's a little bit busy, but probably if you had a thicker line around it, probably wouldn't look too terribly bad. You'd still be able to read it. So again, nice complex patterns in PowerPoint. Now I think the last one I'd like to try is something called light screen. So I'm going to click on this one, go to my artistic effects, and click on here. So light screen puts kind of like a little tile pattern on it. So you can see the grid size. If you spin up, the grid pieces get bigger. You spin down, the grid pieces get smaller. Except for this one. number 3. Number 3 is unique. So if I click on number 3, it doesn't actually go up or down, increase or decrease. It actually flattens it. Now I'm going to just show you that. If I go back up, big tiles. If I go back down, little tiles. Okay, but if I go to number 3, let me just go back up. Let me work my way down and get to number 3 again. And you can see it kind of gives me some flatter tiles. Some move out. It's really an interesting pattern. Very interesting. Okay, let me copy that. Let me click in here. And let's tile that. And you get a fairly busy pattern, but kind of interesting pattern. Okay, now what I like to do with that one is I want to copy that, paste it as a new image, and let's apply a nice artistic effect to that. Now let's try this one. Again, I'm going to go to my favorites, so I'm going to go to Paintbrush. And Paintbrush gives you more like blobs of paint. It looks a little more abstract, but it looks a little more painterly, not so mechanical as that. So I'm going to copy that. Click here. Beautiful pattern. If that were a bigger tile, so it was more sharper, it would be perfect for text. And of course, in the next video, we're going to show you how to create stretch patterns like this for the text. Okay, so let's go to tile. So that's a little more different than the straightforward tile. It's a little more painterly, a little more interesting. So we can always go here and let's see. Let's try dark strokes. We can try cutout, kind of an interesting little pattern. We can try something like Mosaic Bubbles. Mosaic Bubbles is really not that effective, and here's why. Mosaic Bubbles belongs to a handful of these artistic effects that scale with the image. You don't really notice anything here with Mosaic Bubbles. It's a bubble pattern, but it's one of the handful of artistic effects that scale to the size of the object. So if you're putting it into rectangular text and they're small, the bubbles are small. If they're large, the bubbles are corresponding larger. So it's a scalable effect. So sometimes people don't realize that and they don't really see anything. So I'm going to just quickly demonstrate that here. Let me just take this. I'll just put it over here. And what I'm going to do is just make a whole bunch of these. Okay. I'm going to copy these, paste them as a new image. I'll get rid of these. And what I'm going to do with these is put Mosaic Bubbles on it. And you can see the Mosaic Bubbles are bigger than what you see here. Okay, just because the image is bigger. So Mosaic Bubbles, like marker and a couple other ones, are scalable to the size of the object. So I'm going to take this now, I'm going to crop it back to one little tile that it was, and say back down to here. Now let me copy that and put that in here. And we'll tile that. And now you're going to have a slightly bigger bubble pattern in there. So you can actually see it a little better. And if you make this even bigger, then the bubble pattern gets bigger. So you may have tried Mosaic Bubbles or marker and thought, well, they don't really do anything. And that's because your object you're putting them into isn't big enough for them to scale to that size. So if you want a bigger, in this example, bubble pattern, just make a bigger image and apply it there, crop it down, and then put it into your object. And then you get a much bigger pattern like that. Okay, so I think you kind of got the idea of mirror patterns, and how to create them, how to use the artistic effects. And I guess the last thing to really show you are just some of the options we have here. So again, our alignment is to the top left, but it doesn't have to be. So I'm clicking on this one here. If I go here and try center, you'll see it's going to center the object inside. And if you go to say bottom right, it goes to the bottom right. So again, it's not always that you have to have it to the top left. You can move it around anywhere you like. And let's just try some different mirror types. So now we have both. Let's try horizontal. Get a different pattern. That looks pretty good. No edges, looks really good. Let's try vertical. Not too bad. So again, you get a different pattern. So don't forget to play with your patterns. Now they're not always going to work out perfectly. Sometimes you see edges, and then you have to see which one works the best. Now you could also scale your pattern. Now I could make these smaller. I could shrink these smaller and paste them in there, or I could go right here. So let's say I scale 50%. And we get a much smaller pattern. Again, so there's a lot of options to play with. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. So we showed you how to, again, create the seamless tile. We showed you how to mirror a simple geometric pattern. And then we showed how to add artistic effects and create some very creative kaleidoscope type effect mirror tiles. If you choose a different pattern, you're going to get different results. There's an unlimited number of patterns you can actually make. So we hope you found this video useful. Hopefully you can add this to your PowerPoint projects. Our next video, and the last in this series, is we're going to create patterns that we can put into text. When we do that, we're going to be stretching them into text. We're not going to be tiling them into text. We're going to stretch them in there. So we're going to create nice abstract patterns. They're going to act as a fill into text. So hopefully you can catch that one. So thank you again for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you'd like to subscribe, we always got a lot of techniques to show you on creating PowerPoint projects, creating clip art in PowerPoint. If there's anything you didn't quite understand, just leave a comment and we'll try to get back to you. So again, thank you for watching, and we hope to catch you on video number 3, which is the last in this series.